Hey again, everybody. This is Mr. Burke again. Let's just carry on reading The Giver. Let's head on to chapter 3, all right? Oh, look! Lily squealed in delight. Isn't he cute? Look how tiny he is. And he has funny eyes like yours, Jonas. Jonas glared at her. He didn't like it when she mentioned his eyes. He waited for his father to chastise Lily, but father was busy unstrapping the carrying basket from the back of his bicycle. Jonas walked over to look. It was the first morning Jonas decided he had looked at the new child peering up curiously from the basket. The pale eyes. Almost every citizen in the community had dark eyes. His parents did, Lily did, and so did the group members and friends. There were a few exceptions. Jonas himself, and a female five who he had noticed had the different, lighter eyes. No one mentioned such things. It was not a rule, but it was considered a rule to call attention to things that were unsettling or different about individuals. Lily, he decided, would have to learn that soon, or she would have been called in for chastisement because of her insensitive character. Father put his bike into his port, and then he picked up the basket and carried it into the house. Lily followed behind, but she glanced back over her shoulder at Jonas and teased. Maybe he had the same birth mother as you. Jonas shrugged. He followed them inside, but he had been startled by the new child's eyes. Mirrors were rare in the community. They weren't forbidden, but there was no real need of them. And Jonas had simply never bothered to look at himself very often, even when he found himself in a location where a mirror existed. Now, seeing the new child and its expression, he was reminded that the light eyes were not only a rarity, but gave the one who had them a certain look. What was it? Depth, he decided? Yeah, as if one were looking into clear water of the river down to the bottom, where things might lurk which hadn't been discovered yet. He felt self conscious, realizing that he too had the look. He went to his desk, pretending not to be interested in the new child. And on the other side of the room, Mother and Lily were bending over and watched as Father unwrapped its blanket. What's its comfort object called? Lily asked, picking up the stuffed creature which had been placed next to the new child in the basket. Father glanced at it. Hippo. Lily giggled at the strange word. Hippo, she repeated, and put the comfort object down again. She peered at the unwrapped new child who waved his arms. I think new children are so cute, Lily sighed. I hope I get assigned to be a birth mother. Lily! Mother spoke very sharply. Don't say that. There, there's a very little honor in that assignment. But But I was talking to Natasha, the 10 who lives around the corner. She does some of the volunteer hours at the birthing center. She told me that the birth mothers get wonderful food and they have very gentle exercise periods. And most of the time, they just play games and amuse themselves while they're waiting. I think I'd like that, Lily said. 3 years, Mother told her firmly. 3 births, and that's all. After that, they're all laborers for the rest of their adult lives until the day they enter the house of the old. Is that what you want, Lily? 3 lazy years and then hard physical labor until you're old? Well, no, I guess not, Lily acknowledged reluctantly. Father turned the new child onto his tummy in the basket. He sat beside it and rubbed its small back with a rhythmic motion. Anyway, Lily, he said affectionately, the birth mothers never even get to see the new children. If you enjoy the little one so much, you should hope for an assignment as a nurturer. When you're an 8 and you start your volunteer hours, you can try some nurturing center, Mother suggested. Yes, I think I will, Lily said. She knelt beside the basket. What did you say his name is? Gabriel? Hello, Gabriel, she said in a sing song voice. And then she giggled. Oops, she whispered. I think he's asleep. I guess I better be quiet. Jonas turned to his school assignments on his desk. Some chance of that, he thought. Lily was never quiet. Probably she should hope for an assignment as speaker, so that she could sit in the office with a microphone all day making announcements. He laughed to himself silently, picturing his sister droning in the self important voice that all speakers develop to say things like, "Attention! This is a reminder to females under 9 that hair ribbons are to be neatly tied at all times." He turned toward Lily and noticed his satisfaction that her ribbons were, as usual, undone and dangling. There would be an announcement like that quite soon, he felt certain. It would be directed mainly at Lily, though her name, of course, would never be mentioned. Everyone would know, though. Everyone had known he remembered his humiliation, that the announcement, "Attention, this is a reminder to male 11s that objects are not to be removed from the recreation area and that snacks are to be eaten, not hoarded." He had specifically been directed at him. The last day of the month when he had taken an apple home. No one had mentioned it, not even his parents, because the public announcement had been sufficient to produce the appropriate remorse. He had, of course, disposed of the apple and made his apology to the recreation director the next morning before school. Jonas thought again about the incident. He was still bewildered by it, not by the announcement or the necessary apology. Those were standard procedures, and he had deserved them. But by the incident itself. He probably should have brought up his feelings of bewilderment that very evening when the family unit had shared their feelings of the day. But he had not been able to sort out and put words into the source of his confusion. So he let it pass. It had happened during a recreation period when he had been playing with Asher. Jonas had casually picked up an apple from the basket where his snacks were kept and had thrown it to his friend. Asher had thrown it back, and they began a simple game of catch. There had been nothing special about it, and it was an activity that he performed countless times. Throw, catch, throw, catch. It was effortless for Jonas. Even boring, though Asher enjoyed it, and playing catch was a required activity for Asher because it would improve his hand-eye coordination, which was not up to standards. But suddenly Jonas noticed, following the path of the apple through the air with his eyes, the piece of fruit had, well, this was the part that he couldn't quite adequately understand. The apple had changed. Just for an instant. It changed midair, he remembered. Then it was in his hand, and he looked carefully, but it was still the same apple, unchanged. The same size, shape, perfect sphere, the same nondescript shade, about the same shade as his own tunic. There was nothing absolutely remarkable about the apple. He tossed it back and forth between his hands a few times, and then he'd thrown it again to Asher. And again, in the air, for an instant only, it changed. It had happened 4 times. Jonas had blinked, looked around, and tested his eyesight, squinting at the small print on the identification badge attached to his tunic. And he read his name quite clearly. He could also clearly see Asher at the other end of the throwing area, and he had no problem catching the apple. Jonas had been completely mystified. "Ash," he called out, "does anything seem strange to you about the apple?" "Yes," Asher called back, laughing. "It jumps out of my hands and onto the ground." Asher had just dropped it once again, and Jonas laughed too, and with this laughter tried to ignore the uneasy conviction that something had happened. But he had taken the apple home against the recreation area rules, and that evening, before his parents and Lily arrived at the dwelling, he had held it in his hands and looked at it carefully. It was slightly bruised now, because Asher had dropped it several times, but there was nothing at all unusual about the apple. He held it at a magnifying glass to it. He tossed it in the air several times around the room, watching it, and rolled it around to watch it, and around on his desktop, waiting for the same thing to happen again. But it didn't. The only thing that happened was in the announcement later that evening of the speaker. The announcement that had singled him out without using his name. That had both caused both of his parents to glance meaningfully at his desk where the apple still lay. Now sitting at his desk, staring at his schoolwork as his family hovered over a new child in the basket, he shook his head, trying to forget the odd incident. He forced himself to arrange his papers and try to study a little before the evening meal. The new child, Gabriel, stirred and whimpered. And Father spoke softly to Lily, explaining the feeding procedure as he opened the container that held the formula and the equipment. The evening proceeded as all evenings did in the family unit, in the dwelling, in the community. Quiet, reflective, a time for renewal and preparation for the day to come. It was different only in the addition to it of a new child with his pale, solemn, knowing eyes. All right, so let's talk about some questions about that chapter. What do y'all say? All right, so chapter 3. What did Jonas notice about the apple? What do y'all think? What did he notice about the apple? What was it that that he noticed? Question number 2. How do all evenings end in the community? And question number 3. What are birth mothers? Thank you for watching this video. I hope you stick around and you'll listen to the next one, guys.